Hey, welcome back, guys. I'm Todd Blackman, your Essential Drummer, and welcome to episode number 3. Yes, hello again. Hey, yes. So, before we start this episode, I want to thank my listeners for just taking their time out of the day to listen to me. So, really appreciate that. If you want to go the extra mile, give me a rating or a review and all that. I want to hear your all's viewpoints and thoughts and suggestions on future episodes. So, that'd be pretty cool. So, yeah, just get that out of the way and all that, and let's get with the show. So, in this episode, it's not this. This is a disclaimer. It's not designed for just drummers. So, if you're a drummer and you feel like this is a really good episode for one of your musician friends, and you secretly think that their timing is bad, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So, but just share this episode with some other musician friends. They will get a lot of information from this podcast. Like this is like some course that you would pay for, like a $400 course to be able to do this. But you're listening to this podcast and you're doing it for free. But the only downside is you're not getting hand-on-hand experience. So it's always best to have a mentor when you're doing this and all that. So maybe share this with your mentor. So let's give it the podcast. So metronomes, and no, not those garden gnomes, the hybrid breeds, but metronomes are a musician's best friends. So we use the metronome basically to keep our time afloat, keep it steady, and have a reference because it is your best friend. And there are so many different levels to playing, and I do want to mention, before I mention the levels, I want to mention 3 different type of musicians that are out there, and I'm pretty sure you identify as one of them, and hopefully you're the hybrid. So, the first type of musician is a musician that practices with the metronome all the time, and that is a good practice. And there is only one downside, is that they are the people that follow the rules. They don't think about the independently of the time. And so that is the only downside of practicing the metronome all the time, is because it's kind of like you're following the rules and you're not being independent. It's like training wheels and all. Now, the second type of musician is a musician that doesn't practice with the metronome and at all, like never heard of a metronome. Is like, what's a metronome? So those people usually have bad time, and sometimes they don't. And the only reason why they don't have bad time is because they are listening to records and they got the feel of a specific player, and that's the good thing. But it is also a downside as well. But I'm not discouraging those types of people. But I am saying that depending on the type of person, your learning style, it could be a downfall or a downside. Not a downfall, but more on like the low side and all that. Not the best results for your money and all. So, and then you got the hybrid type of musician. So the hybrid musician does both the play with the metronome and not play with the metronome. And it's always good to have these two things. And so later in these levels, I will mention like getting away from the metronome a little bit and be able to really listen to the space between your notes. And that's very important. And I learned this fact from Pavel. Pavel, he's a classical guitar player, and he had this master class, and he mentioned about timing, and his viewpoint was listening the space between the notes, and sometimes we listen with our eyes, not with our ears, and this is another exercise that I will mention, that when you're playing, actually close your eyes when you play, and really listen and not look. And there are some teachers that I've seen do this, where it's like they're playing big band charts and they say, close your eyes and all that. And they're like, what? And all. So this is some examples I want to mention of ways to improve your time and actually be independent, because sometimes when you're on a gig, you will not have a metronome with you, and you might you might actually get fired from a gig because your timing sucks. Yes, I said the word sucks. And it's true. And I'm an example of a musician who gets other drummers fired because their timing, they're not getting it right. They're not working on it. And so they're getting fired for this little silly thing of groove, which is really important. And it's really not silly. It is important. And it's really important to have groove, timing, and consistency. And you don't want to get fired. And it's really important to have that metronome time technique. It's a technique because it takes over time to be able to perfect it. And still to this day, there's no one has perfect time. Steve Gadd has really great time. I'm not saying he doesn't have bad time, but I'm just saying like at a robotic level of a metronome, like a human metronome and all that. So that's what I'm basically saying. So let us get to the levels of metronome practice. So we pretty much know this elemental practice playing on all the downbeats. This is level 1, practicing on all the downbeats. So you have to click on, and pretty much it's like on 1, 2, 3, 4 and all. So that's self-explanatory. You're just practicing your material with the downbeat. And that's pretty much that practice routine where you're practicing stick control, where you're practicing rudiments, where you're doing like maybe if you're a guitar player, like doing some pick motions and all that type of stuff, or bass fingering. You want to have that consistency when you're practicing with a metronome. Make sure you're on top of it. Now, I do want to say that there are two sides to doing this. Practicing when you're practicing the downbeats. So when you are playing, when you have headphones in, like right now I have headphones in. And so when I'm practicing, I don't hear a cancellation of sound when my headphones are off and I'm practicing on a practice pad where the iPhone speaker, which is my metronome and all that, is clicking. And then when I make a tap sound, it cancels out because it's right on the beat. So those are two sides to take into consideration and all that. And this is why it's really good to practice softly and all that, so you be able to hear yourself and also maybe the metronome and also hear the cancellation between sounds because they match like a sine wave out of phase. So I want to mention that first level and all that little characteristic for that first level, and it could be matched with other levels and all that because that really tells you that your timing is great. So the next level I do want to mention is playing with the metronome on mute beats. So with the mute beats, so you have to click on all fours and all that. And what a mute beat is, depending on what app you have, what metronome you're using, they have several different functions to where that you're able to mute some of the beats. So you're able to mute, let's say like 1 and 3, and you got the 2 or 4, a classic like dun, 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 and all that type of stuff, all that jazz 2 and 4 stuff for a swing. So that's a good way to actually develop some jazz stuff is having to click on 2 and 4. But why do people have this space between the clicks? And this is actually kind of slowly getting your training wheels off because level 1 is basically having training wheels, so making sure that you're on the beats and it's making sure everyone is right on track and not dragging or rushing. And so it's just getting you off those training wheels. And that is a really good thing to do. So there's different combinations out there for muting these beats. You can either do the 2-4, and these are all the clicking sounds, not the mute sounds. You have the clicking on the 1-3, you have 1-2, you have 2-3, you have 3-4, and then I think I said 1-4, I'm not too sure. But those are some of the combinations you could do for your practice. And remember where the click is Because if you have it on 1 free and you're accidentally playing 2 and 3, then you're going to be off, and that's not the goal of your practice. Like, it wasn't your main goal. The goal changed because of your playing. And so this is just some exercise. It's like if you're practicing rudiments and you have this click thing, or a drum beat and you have this click thing going, then you want to make sure it's consistent and really listen to the space between notes. So the next level I want to mention is kind of like a hybrid of level 2, and it is an exercise as well. So it's prolonged mute beats. This is level 3, prolonged mute beats. So in prolonged mute beats, here's the example. So let's say your Metronome app has this function where you can have more beats, and so as much as possible. So you might have this function to where that you're able to have 16/4, and you're able to have 8 of them have the click sound and 8 of them muted. So let's say you're playing a drum beat and you're clicking, and this is a really great exercise to actually get yourself really off the training wheels with the metronome and become a more independent musician with your time. And so you're clicking and then it's muted. There's no sound, just you playing the drums. And then when you come back in, and sometimes I call it out of phase timing. Your timing is out of phase to where that it's like like a little flam. It's like no, you are dragging or rushing depending on where the note was. So if it was before the note, you were dragging. If it was after the note, you were rushing, man. Yeah, like Putin or Russian Putin. So enough of that Russian jokes. It's time for a drag. Yeah. So that's pretty much the level 3 thing. And there's really not too much to it. You can do different things, like different bursts of patterns. You could do every 4. You could do 8, or you could do 16ths if it lets you do 32/4. Or you could slow the metronome, slow it down a lot. Like if you're at, let's say, 200 BPM and all that, and you're like, man, I'm pretty good. Just slow it down to 100, half the speed. That way you're like having more time to think about the spacing, more space. And so you really have to think. If you're not sweating when you're doing this, then you might be doing something wrong, or it might be not hard enough for you, and you need to do a more challenging thing. But it has to line up perfectly. So the next level 4 is, what was level 4 and all that? Displacement. Displacement is when you kind of change where your objective is. So let's say you usually have the click on 1, 2, 3, 4, but displacement is, here's a common one, having the clicks on the ands. I think I just blew your mind, guys. You're like, what? I thought it was all on the downbeats. No, you can do something else. You always do something else with this type of practice. So with playing on the ands, you're going to have to think a little bit deeper and concentrate a little harder with this. And so some people have a hard time with this concept. And sometimes when they do this concept, they're going to tendency to rush or drag, depending on what type of person you are. And it's going to take a little time to be able to get this concept. So because it's adjusting your ears. You're not used to hearing the click on the ear, ands with your ears. And so it's going to take a little time. Trust me, it took me a little time to know this type of concept. And I learned this from Benny Greb on his, what is it, Groove, The Science of Groove DVD. And so I learned that from him and all. So it's a very interesting way of doing time. And it also goes to the E's and the U's. And so those are the next level. And so disclaimer about this, do not do it too fast. Because once you have this click thing way too fast and all that, you're going to mess up immediately. So when you're doing these types of clicking and all that, it's no longer on all the downbeats. It's on like every other thing, like the ands, e's, or s, or e and type of stuff. So it's important to do this slow because, like, there's really nothing too fast unless you do a metal thing, but really you shouldn't have to click too fast and all that. It's just a reference type of thing. And if you want to go a deeper level with this, do some mute beats, like mute every other one, like you have the and of one, but you don't have the and of two, but you have the and of three, but you don't have the and of four. So that's a next level thing for that. But it's like a subcategory level in that system. So that is a very interesting concept, but there is more to this. There is more. And this is the next thing I'm going to say. I'm not sure if I should do a part 2 to this, but I'm going to mention what level 5 is. I'm pretty sure I might do a part 2 of this because the next this metronome practice is like really a course. To be able, really, you need to take a course of metronome practice. In my opinion, you need a course because this is a deep level stuff. So level 5 is basically kind of like polyrhythms metronome practice. So what do I mean by this? As an example, so you have the metronome going and all. So let's say that it's like 4/4, and so you already do like the mute beats, and you kind of do displacements too, but you're kind of doing a polyrhythm type of thing. So here is like an example of a polyrhythm type of metronome practice. So you have the click going, and you have to do some trial ever to get this sound. But the click is always going to go, here's an example. So you have a grouping of free. You don't have any displacements, but it is like you're playing free over 4. So the click is going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And all. So it's displacing, it's playing groups of 3, and every third note it has a click sound. So it's like on 1, 4, then on the next measure 3, then on the next measure 2, and it repeats that cycle. So that is another metronome practice level, and I could go deeper with this, but I am thinking I am going to have to make a part 2 of this because this is some deep stuff, guys. Like, if you can handle this, then your timing should be excellent when you don't have the metronome on. So just take that, let it settle, and then I'm going to make a part 2 of this, and when you're ready, listen to the part 2, because I'm going to go deep in detail of the class I took at Texas State. It was Jazz Fury and Improv, and we talked about metronome practice, and I mentioned that Benny Greb did this type of thing, but he doesn't go in this deep a type of stuff where you're playing polyrhythms of the click. And this stuff is very hard. Some of this stuff I'm still working on, but it's very tricky. You gotta really think about the spacing between notes, and that's its design. That's what it's supposed to do. So I hope you learned something today. So anyway, guys, I'm going to make a part 2 of this, and I'll see y'all in the next episode.